Hello everybody, this is AK. I'm back. This is a surprise video, right? Because I didn't plan on making this video. I was thinking of taking the rest of the week off from YouTube and from blogging, because I managed to get a few days of premium membership for World of Warships by exchanging currencies which I earn in game, you know. So it's staying free to play. I'm not going to spend real money on the game. It's a very good game, but you know, I don't ever pay for games these days. Anyway, before we start on the video proper, the topic proper, I want to take a moment to thank a viewer who stood up for me in response to my comment in my last video about having ads in my YouTube channel, YouTube videos, right? And he went to he said ads are meant to support content creators and the platform, and if people are bothered by the advertisements, they can either pay for a premium or find ways to block it, right? I don't know what are the ways to block advertisements on YouTube. I know there are ad blockers that work to block ads in blogs, but I don't know about YouTube. So if there is, then that's something new to me. But like I said, you know, usually I just skip the ads after 5 seconds, right? So if the ads bother you, just skip them, right? But I truly appreciate a comment like this from a viewer. I'm human too. I appreciate kindness, all right? And that is a reason why I appreciate viewers and readers who take a moment to click like for my videos. I spend at least an hour producing each video, right? And that's only when I'm successful with the first recording, right? Like for this video, this is already my third recording because the first two didn't go well. Too many interruptions and funny noises, right? So just a moment to like my video is much appreciated, right? The last video I didn't get as many likes because I think I might have stepped on too many toes, and in fact it got quite a number of dislikes. That's why I'm saying that maybe I stepped on too many toes. I think people didn't like what I said about, some people didn't like what I said about having ads in the videos, and some people didn't like what I said about getting complaints whenever share prices fall, and how they should take ownership of their decisions and learn how to value businesses, don't follow blindly and buy something where they don't even know what's the value of what they're buying. I mean, it's all a fair statement, right? They're all fair statements, but some people don't like to hear the truth maybe, but please be assured that I didn't say anything out of malice. I didn't mean any harm, and I hope people will take my criticism positively and do some self-improvement. Okay, but if you felt hurt, if people felt hurt with what I said, then I suppose there isn't anything I can do to help them, right? Like I said before, misery loves company, and I'm not one for that kind of thing, right? Okay, now let's move on to today's topic proper, right? Otherwise, I'll just ramble on and on. You see on screen, that is a screenshot of one of my more recent blog posts. In that blog post, I shared my purchase prices when I got into the 3 local banks, DBS, OCBC and UOB. So if you are interested in that kind of thing, I will leave a link in the description below, and you can read up on at your own leisure. In today's video, I'm going to talk about numbers too, but more to do with dividends, right? I saw some content, right, in social media that said something about the bank's dividends crashing, right, and how the dividends could be in peril, right? So I think that's very close to fear mongering. So I just have to respond. The reason for thinking that the bank's dividends might actually reduce are mainly two. Number one is that interest rates have peaked and they are probably on their way down, right, in sometime in 2024, right? That's the argument. Number two would be the threat from digital banks, which have been making their rounds in Singapore. Let's look at the first threat of reducing interest rate. Yeah, okay. Ambulance. Ambulance. Very loud. Okay, it's gone. Let's continue. Let's hope I don't have to do another recording. Let's hope this is the final one. Where was I? Yeah. Interest rates. Yeah. So interest rates going down in 2024, and how would that impact the banks? Well, for sure it will impact the bank because I can imagine their net interest margin going down a bit. But if you notice, the banks are very smart, right? DBS, OCBC and UOB, they've already reduced the interest rates they are offering on fixed deposits, and not by a little bit, but by quite a lot, right? You're talking about reduction from like 4.08% per annum for 8 months fixed deposit down to what, 2.6% per annum. It's a reduction of like more than 1%, more than 1.5% per annum, right? So they are already front loading the expectation of an interest rates cut, and frankly they are probably so flush with liquidity that they don't need any more deposits from us. That's the reason why they are able to reduce the offering of higher interest rates for fixed deposits, right? Our banks are very prudent, they are very smart, they are very savvy. Even if interest rates were to decline, we have to remember that that's not their only source of income. Net interest income is not their only source of income. They also have income from fees, for example, and in the case of OCBC, they also have income from Great Eastern Life, their insurance arm, right? So don't be too fixated by a reduction in interest rates. Don't be too fixated on reduction in interest rates and how that might reduce earnings for the banks. There's only one part of the story. Okay, and as for digital banks, point number two, I've said this before in past blogs whenever people ask me this question. Digital banks, are they going to adversely affect our local banks, the incumbents, DBS, OCBC and UOB? And my response has always been, I don't think so. Quite unlikely. The reason is because DBS, OCBC and UOB have all gone digital many years ago. You know, the reason why SPH was disrupted, and very badly disrupted, was because they didn't anticipate change and they didn't evolve fast enough, right? And that sounds like AK, because AK is old-fashioned, AK is old school, and AK doesn't like change very much, but change comes and hits me in the face sometimes. But of course, I'm just an individual, but for a business, it can be a big deal, and it is usually a big deal, especially if the disruption is huge, right? And of course, we know what happened to SPH. But in the case of the banks, they saw all this years ago, and they already took measures. I mean, if they didn't go digital years ago, I would be very worried for them today. But that's not the case. And because they went digital so many years ago, they're able to control the cost of doing business very well. And in fact, the cost of doing business for all three banks have come down over the years, right? And which, of course, helps them when it comes to their earnings as well. So, and in fact, I think the digital banks are not very impactful in Singapore for the simple reason that Singapore is not underbanked, right? Digital banks are only impactful, I think, in countries with very big geographical landmass, and there are people in remote places that cannot access brick and mortar banks, for example. And going digital helps because it doesn't matter where you are, as long as there's an internet connection, you can do your banking on the phone, right? So Singapore, the underbanked, not so many people. Most of us have at least one bank account. In my case, I have 4 bank accounts, and I'm very sure most of us have more than one bank account, not just one. Right. So in a scenario like this, you get a lot of competition that is self-destructive. Right. I'll share an example here, a very personal one. Slightly embarrassing, but okay lah, I'll share it lah. A friend introduced me to Trust Bank in Singapore, which I think is a joint venture between NTUC, FairPrice, and Standard Chartered Bank. And he said if I use his referral link, he would get something, I would get something. And what I would get was $35 of FairPrice voucher. And of course, I thought that was pretty attractive. All I had to do was deposit $500 in my bank account. I did that. I got the FairPrice vouchers. I spent them, very happy. And then after that, I just withdrew that $500 and put it back in my UOB1 account. Because there is no fall below fee, there's no penalty from Trust Bank for having a zero balance, right? And frankly speaking, the interest rates that they were offering couldn't fight with UOB1 account, right? UOB1 accounts at 5% per annum, and Trust Bank I think is 1.5% per annum. And if you want 2.5% per annum, you have to jump through hoops and loops before you get that 2.5%. It's simply not that attractive, right? And UOB is more attractive, so I just move the money back into UOB. Okay, it's slightly embarrassing, I've said it. So I don't know how many customers did the same thing. Because these digital banks, I don't find the interest rates they offer for the savings account actually more attractive. Right? Even like GXS, you're about 2.99% per annum. You can't beat UOB one accounts 5% per annum. Right? So I think digital banks are going to have a hard time. They are having a hard time trying to gain market share in Singapore. They could chip away at some market share, or maybe just serve those few people, a small percentage of the population that might be underbanked. But otherwise, I don't see them as being a threat to the local lenders. I really don't see that happening. Okay. Then if you say, how come AK are so sure about the bank's prospects and all that? Of course, I am not an insider. I don't work in any of the banks. I don't know what's happening. I have to rely on what they say, and more importantly, not just what they say, but what they do, right? And from there, I arrive at my own decision. I make my own judgment, right? So, for example, in their latest report, right, results announcement, DBS said, and if we have kept up with the news, we would know this. DBS said that they are going to keep 48 cents dividend per share per quarter as the norm. This can continue as the norm, right? And if we annualize this is $1.92 per share per year, right? They are very sure that they can continue with this, right? And if you get $1.92 dividend per share per year, and if you buy at the immediate support, which I identify as somewhere around $32 per share, you're getting a dividend yield of 6%. 6%. And bear in mind that this is just part of their earnings, right? 50 or 60% of their earnings. It's not all of their earnings, right? This is unlike REITs, which pay out all of their income or 90% of their income, right? which is one reason why I don't see any reason to invest in blue chip REITs, so-called blue chip REITs, like REITs run by Mapletree. Right, you get 5%, 5.5, almost 6% per annum. I mean, if DBS can't give you that kind of dividend yield, why bother with those blue chip REITs, for example, right? And this is straight from the horse's mouth. Okay. We also have to remember that DBS CEO also said that they have too much capital. They're holding on to too much capital. It's not productive to hold on to too much capital, in his opinion. That their CET1 ratio is higher than what he thinks is optimal. Right, so they have something like $3 billion in excess capital. Right. We could actually see DBS pay that out as special dividends. Who knows? Right. Personally, I if I were them, I would hold on to that $3 billion in case they see some opportunities and they could use the money opportunistically, right, to do acquisitions, for example. Right, but that's just me lah. You know, AK likes to hold on to cash, right? So that's DBS. Now, what about UOB? This is also straight from the horse's mouth. UOB said that they could have waited for the full year results to come in before they declare higher dividends. But because they are so sure of their prospects, they are so sure that their future is secured, that they'll do much better, that they decided to increase the dividends earlier and declare a higher interim dividend of 85 cents per share. Right, this is about 50% of their earnings. If we annualize that, and if we buy at $27 per share, which is where I see immediate support now, we're looking at a dividend yield of 6.3%. Again, this is 50% of their earnings. Right, and I've said this during Evening with AK and Friends. I've said it in my blog. I've said it in my YouTube channel, that they did the right thing to buy Citibank's consumer businesses in 4 different Southeast Asian countries, and now we are seeing the fruits. And something very important, an important observation is that the Wee family, of course, they run UOB, are very conservative bankers. They are very conservative bankers. And for them to be so bold, they must be able to see very clearly how well they are going to do in the future. Right? And that gives me a lot of confidence. Because someone who's usually very careful, very I almost said the word stingy, very careful, very prudent with my money, is able to come out and be so bold and say, okay, we're paying a dividend that's 40% higher than last year because we know we're going to do well. That is something to sit up and take note of. Okay, that's UOB. Then what about OCBC? Also straight from the horse's mouth. 50% dividend payout is the norm for now. From now on. Previously, it was never made clear, but now it's clear. Right? 40 cents dividend per share, that's 50% of their earnings. Annualize that, you get 80 cents. Right? If you buy at $12.20 per share, which is where I see immediate support, you're looking at a dividend yield of 6.55%. If I were not invested in the banks already, if I were invested in the bank already, and if I didn't have the kind of exposure I have today, you know, more than 30% of my portfolio is made up of my investments in DBS, OCBC and UOB. If I were not in this situation, in this position, I would buy some shares of DBS, OCBC and UOB at immediate support, which I've identified. And if we are a long-term investor for income, if we are patient, there's no reason to fear falling prices. Right? If prices fall, it simply means there's greater value for money, or else being equal, and I would buy a bit more. Right? And if Mr. Market goes into a severe depression and then decides to sell stocks of these 3 banks at below book value, like what it did before a few times in the past, I will be rolling out my war chest, right? So that is in response to some social media influencers who said that the bank's dividends could be in peril, right, from 2024 because interest rates would be falling. I think that is very short-sighted, and that's also very tunnel vision, right? Because it's just like, you know, four blind men touching different parts of the elephant, and they cannot see the whole picture. So they all have a different description or different understanding of what an elephant actually is. Okay, but still I must say this, that this is just AK talking to himself. This is my opinion, right? Don't take everything I've said as the gospel truth. You can get ideas from YouTubers, but don't farm out the thinking process, right? Do some due diligence, think about things on your own, whether it makes sense, and decide on what you should do given your situation and your beliefs, right? AK is not a guru. AK is just mental. But if AK can think for himself, so can you, right? So I think that about does it for this video. I hope you like this video, and till the next video, take care of yourself, right? And I will talk to you again soon. Okay, bye bye.